Welcome back to JordsWoodShop. In this third and final part of this bed base build, we are actually finishing this off. So we've got a few voids that we have to fix up before we get onto the finishing process, but it's getting pretty close. Now I just want to point out that on all the components that I tore down, I did label, so everything will go back the same part. Now, in theory, everything we've cut is to the same dimension, so it should be interchangeable. But by doing this, it ensures that everything goes back together the way it was fitting properly. Now, all of the voids that are on the faces of these pieces are fine. I actually quite like that. But on the edges where there's a little bit of rough grain, we want to fill that so that when we're making the bed, for example, these little sharp corners don't actually, nick a sheet and tear it. So all these voids on the top and on the edges, they're going to get filled. Now, if your workpieces have a big void like this, now there is a method which is using epoxy. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you've seen me do it 100 times before. But essentially, this here, we need to stabilize it. So what I've done is on the other side, I taped off all of the soft area of wood. I've also clamped on this section of MDF, which has a melamine on it, to make sure that everything is well supported. And what I've got to do is just mix up a batch of epoxy and pour it in. Now, you could pigment this, you could go any color you want. I like the contrast of black on a light colored wood, so I'm going to stain my epoxy black just using the West Systems pigment, and then I'll pour that in, and I'll be coming back every 10-15 minutes with a heat gun going over it and then just topping up the epoxy as it soaks it in. Okay, now on these smaller voids like this isn't really an issue as far as construction, but it does cause a little point where a sheet might get a snag. So all we're going to use is standard wood putty. This is slightly darker than it would be when it's dry, but a couple of hours to dry. So now, when we just come back with a bit of sandpaper, we can see that those voids are no longer quite so deep and visible now. All right, so that's everything filled that needs to be filled. So now it's on to the actual fun part, which is the boring part, and that is the finishing process. So everything here has to have the hardware removed and then be thoroughly sanded up to, in my case, 180 grit. You could go higher or lower, it's up to you on what finish you want, but I suggest 180. But as I have a wide belt sander, my life is a bit easier because all these flat pieces with just one grain direction is going to go through my wide belt sander, and then it's just a matter of me, touching it up with hand sanding, getting rid of sharp edges and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so if you haven't seen this machine before, this is called a wide belt sander, and essentially it's got two drums with two different grits of sandpaper on it. It's sort of like a drum sander, but supersized, way bigger. Obviously, this draws about as much power as your entire house would, so it's not something you could probably have in your garage workshop, but it is an awesome luxury to have. So all I'm going to do is set the depth of cut, turn it on, and let it do the rest. Okay, so that is everything sanded, and I've got it here laid out in a couple of sawhorses ready for finishing. So I'm using a fast drying polyurethane through Minwax satin, and because I have the facility, I am going to be spraying the finish. But of course, if you don't have spraying equipment, you could easily do it just with a brush or even do hand rubbed. But what I'd suggest is just do a simple oil or something along those lines, because really, at the end of the day, all you want to do is bring the grain out. You don't need to protect it that much. That's the Minwax fast drying polyurethane semi-gloss. So I think that will look really nice on this bed, but of course, finish choice is up to you. So I'm just going to mix this up, put it in my spray gun, and get spraying. Okay, so that is everything finished. So the rails and the headboard had about 4 coats and everything else was 3 coats. So straight off the gun, it's pretty good. Now we go to carefully put all the hardware back on. So this is the fun part, not scratching anything. So you'll remember in part 1, I used oversized screws in these. So that's the head I was using. Now I've got the new screws and they sit flush. So hopefully my plan works. Okay, and now for the fun part of putting it all back together. There it is, a beautiful queen size bed. So a huge thanks to Koala for sponsoring this build. I couldn't have done it without them. And remember, they are offering JordsWoodShop viewers $100 off their mattress by using the coupon code JORDS20. So if you do want to build along and grab a really nice memory foam mattress, and I mean they are super nice, use that code and you'll get $100 off. So remember, if you do want to build along, you can get the set of plans which have everything you need to build this bed. Now, there were a few things that I changed after the fact. So in the plans, there's a few things that may look slightly different. However, just follow the plans and you won't have any issues. And if you like what I do here on YouTube and would like to help support the show and keep things going, there's a number of ways you can do that. You can do it over on my website by either buying a set of plans, for example, this bed, or making a one-time donation on the donations page. Or if you would like to get more of a monthly sort of thing, you can do that over on Patreon. So patreon.com/JordsWoodShop is a way of you donating a dollar amount every month, and in return you get a few things like early access to content and other cool rewards like that. So once we hit goals, there'll be giveaways and all sorts of things. So if you would like to support the show and do that monthly, head over to patreon.com/JordsWoodShop and it is greatly appreciated. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you click that thumbs up button and leave a comment below. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button so you stay up to date with all of my woodworking videos. So like always, I'll see you in the next video.